Turok game series peaked way too early.
Turok 2 was a masterpiece and really advanced the first-person shooter genre, but then Rage Wars was released, and while it was a decent multiplayer game, it aged far worse than Turok 2 did, and really, if you didn't have people to play it with, it was pretty much useless. Shadow of Oblivion, while having a greater story focus, was still nowhere near as good as Turok 2 was, and really the game felt lackluster in comparison to Turok 2. Turok Evolution sucked more than just about any other Turok game. It was an extremely linear first-person shooter. The weapons were nowhere near as creative as those seen in the previous games. The story was idiotic, and the graphics somehow aged worse than 2's did.
And so now we come to the modern incarnation of Turok, simply named Turok, because as we all know, remakes cannot have their own unique name, or a unique subtitle. Instead, they must simply have the name of the franchise itself. That way you cannot differentiate it from the other games in the series.
Like many games today, this game has been simplified significantly from its earlier incarnations. Where the earlier Turoks were somewhat non-linear, this game is really linear, except when it does try to be non-linear and fails. Essentially what it does is this: it gives you an objective and doesn't tell you where it is. It basically says you have to explore a really small area for a few minutes until you finally stumble across the one and only path there is to the objective. And really, there is literally no reason to explore anything, as you don't get any rewards for it whatsoever. Also, as a standard, you have regenerating health, which I actually like, because unlike with many modern FPSs, this game actually has some legitimate challenge. The dinosaurs can do a lot of damage to you, and the humies are sometimes a legitimate threat, although at times their AI is completely terrible. Just look at this. What are they looking at? Well, now, they're looking at their own death! The gameplay also incorporates QuickTime events, and I like this too, because it allows the knife to be really badass. Also, like with most modern games, you only get 2 weapons, in addition to the bow and knife, but we will get into the highly disappointing weapons later. Now, unfortunately, all you do in this game is kill things. You see, in earlier Turok games, you actually had objectives that you had to complete. You had to rescue friendly combat personnel, shut down things, turn on things. Here, you basically fight 2 cutscenes. That's it. Turok himself can do nothing unless he's in a bloody cutscene.
Perhaps we, the player, are a certain aspect of his mind. Perhaps every time the camera zooms into the back of his head, it is not us taking control of his mind, but instead the armor of his soul that keeps him from going insane. Or it could be laziness. But since this is a Turok game, I'm going with soul armor!
Graphically, the game looks really good. Everything looks very realistic, and the textures are also quite good, but graphics don't count. Turok 2 was, for the time, a graphical masterpiece, but you had countless hours of gameplay, varied objectives, and enemies, and levels that were not just a big green mess. Throughout the game, you fight through just 3 environments. A jungle, which while looking good is still just a bloody jungle. A cave, while looking good, is still just a bloody cave. And the obligatory generic military base. The enemies also look pretty good. The dinosaurs have decent damage models and they animate well. The humies look okay, although they of course can't have any blood because that would just be too extreme. Even though in Turok 1, the cyborgs bled. The sound design is also lacking because all the guns sound like generic guns. Remember the double barrel from Turok 2 and its mighty roar? Well, don't expect that from this shotgun. The voice acting is surprisingly good, with all the voice actors sounding like they can actually act. The sounds the dinosaurs make is pretty lackluster. In fact, a lot of the roars sound like they have been recycled from something else. The music is almost non-existent, and that seems to be the case with many games these days. They just don't have any good music. Turok 1 had a great soundtrack. Just listen to this. Yeah. Now we just get silence for the most part. What music is actually there is generic, to say the least. The version we are looking at here is the PC version, and unlike with a lot of PC ports, this has actually been decently optimized. The QuickTime events are easy to pull off, and most of the controls and menus work well. The only problem is, you can't change the controls for secondary fire or grenades. In order to use the secondary fire, you have to hold shift and right click. In order to fire grenades, you have to hold shift and left click. Why couldn't grenades be the infinitely more intuitive G key?
Turok games are so great because they had numerous original and awesome weapons. 2 words, cerebral bore. Also, Turok games had varied and fairly awesome enemies. Sure, there were T-Rexes and Raptors, but they had frickin' laser beams attached to them! Turok 2008, on the other hand, despite being made in the modern era with all the modern conveniences, chooses to follow through with absolutely none of these traditions.
The first weapon you get is a submachine gun, and that is really quite original because it's not like every bloody game has one, but I'll be nice and let it go, because the first weapon you got in both Turok 1 and 2 was a generic pistol. The SMG is a decent weapon, it has good range and damage, and you can silence it if you want to be stealthy. Not that you'll ever need to. You can also dual wield, but honestly you never want to because you can't zoom in and the gun is far less useful. The knife, thankfully, is still as powerful as it was in Turok 1. You can kill basic humies in one hit, and you can also kill some dinos in one hit. In order to do a one-hit kill, you go into a QuickTime event that is very simple. You just press the fire button. You then get the shotgun, and it's terrible. It doesn't seem to do that much more damage than the SMG, and it takes far too much time to reload. A travesty, to say the least. You eventually find a bow, and it works very well as a long-range weapon, and it can kill some humies in a single hit. And it's also silent. You can carry a sniper rifle, but you won't because you can only carry 2 weapons, and you will only ever need to snipe humans as dinos just charge at you, thus making the sniper rifle entirely pointless, seeing as how you do not want to tie up a precious inventory slot with a weapon you already have. The plasma rifle, or pulse rifle as it's called in-game. Could this game get any more unoriginal? This is Turok, right? Not aliens with dinosaurs. The plasma rifle is the best weapon in the game. You will never need anything else because this gun does great damage and it has its own grenade supply. This weapon, of course, flies right into the face of earlier Turok games because in those games you had to use a variety of different weapons to counter certain enemy types. Here, you can kill anything with this, and really, the other weapons don't really warrant mentioning because they are just basic as all hell. In Turok 2, you had 2 pages of awesome weapons, and here you can get away with just using the plasma rifle and the bow. Like the first Turok game, you fight humans as well as dinosaurs, and like all FPSs today, you fight only one type of Humie. The Humies, of course, look nothing. I mean nothing like the Hellgas from the Killzone series, and of course, it's not like the developers also ripped off the glowy eye thing either. And of course, let's not forget that in Turok 1, you had numerous bipedal enemies. It's not like you had cyborgs, evil tribesmen, robots, or anything like that. But despite all my complaints, the dinos are good when compared to other first-person shooters. At least these enemies are different from the hordes of samey bad guys you usually have to fight. Quite possibly the most annoying enemy in this game is this mutated jungle cat slash raptor dinosaur. Essentially, they are hard to see, they move really fast, and they don't just attack you like any other enemy. Oh no, they just hit you once, knock you over, and then hit you again, knock you over again, and eventually you die. They take a huge amount of punishment for what they are, and really, this could go on a list of the top 10 most annoying enemies in video games. And now to the bosses. In the previous Turoks, they were really tough. You had to know what weapons to use, and you had to know when and how to use them. Here, you just have to guess the boss's gimmick. My favorite boss in the game is the sea monster. He is cool, even if his patterns are easily countered and understood. Now, it would be fun if you have to use your ammo wisely and hit him in just the weak spots. But no, that would be too fun. Instead, you have to shoot these gas pockets with the flamethrower. Also, what's wrong with having a boss health meter? It would be nice to know if I'm actually hurting the bloody thing. And now we are finally going to take a look at what I think is the best aspect of the game, the story. The first negative thing many people say about this game is the fact that it has nothing to do with the Turok story. I say, perhaps this Turok is that future space Turok seen in some of the comics. It's a stretch, but one I am willing to make. The game forgoes the more fantastical elements seen in Turok 1 and 2, and instead plays it straight with a typical military science fiction story. And I say it works, because it does a great job ripping off Aliens and Predator. But when we move away from rip-off territory, the story still holds up, and it's presented in a very compelling manner. The character of Turok is actually fairly well thought out. He is a flawed hero, but not a cheap anti-hero. The enemy you fight is a rogue spec ops group called Wolfpack, of which Turok was once a member. Turok eventually left Wolfpack because he can no longer stomach their operating methods. methods. You generally, and I do mean generally because the partner AI is absolutely terrible, fight alongside Whiskey Company. They are a ripoff of Artie's squad from Predator and also a ripoff of the Colonial Marine squad from Aliens. Primarily, you will fight alongside Ron Perlman.
That'd be a great weapon. If we were fighting General Custer.
He actually has some pretty good dialogue and is funny from time to time. The best thing about the Turok character itself is the fact that just because Turok is Native American doesn't mean he likes or is even supportive of his Native American heritage. When Turok gets his bow during his Wolfpack training, he says this:
"This bow is for you. It represents your passage to the next level of training."
Is this a joke?
This shows that Turok is more than just a one-note Native American character. It actually shows that the developers put some thought into his character. Now, if only they had put more thought into the other aspects of the game.
And so that is Turok 2008. Many are quick to dismiss it as just another average FPS, and for the most part, they would be right. The story is really what sets this game apart from other modern FPSs. It's just presented that well. And I recommend this game to any FPS fan, and I even recommend it to Turok fans. Just think of this Turok as that future space Turok from the comics. And so this is GeneralLotz wishing you good Perfect Dark Zero. Good Bulletstorm, for the most part, or whatever makes you happy.